The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 200 species sat in their designated seats, watching the holographic display at the center of the room. The image showed a planet burning, cities turned to ash, ships falling from the sky like dead birds. Talos stood at the speaking platform. She was Velith, a slender being with 4 arms and skin that glowed soft blue when she was calm. Right now, her skin flickered between dark purple and black, the colors of terror. "Please," she said. Her voice was musical, like wind through crystal chimes, but it cracked with desperation. "The Drath swarm has reached our world. They came 3 days ago. Already 2 of our cities are gone. Our people are dying by the thousands." She raised all 4 of her hands toward the council. "We have no army. We have no weapons. We are farmers and artists and teachers. We cannot fight these creatures. We beg you, send help. Send anyone." The council members looked at each other. Some whispered to their aides. Others simply stared at their screens, pretending to read important documents. High Arbiter Malin of the Inari rose from his elevated seat. He was tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes like polished black stones. The Inari had founded the council 8,000 years ago. Their word was law. "Representative Tallow," Malin said. His voice was cold and smooth. "The council sympathizes with the Velith. Truly we do, but you must understand the situation." He waved his hand, and the holographic display changed. A map of the galaxy appeared, with Cora 4 marked as a tiny red dot at the far edge. "Your world is located in the outer rim. It would take our nearest fleet 40 cycles to reach you. The Drath would have consumed your planet long before we arrived." Talow's glow went completely dark. "Then send ships from closer systems. The humans." "No!" Malin's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "We do not contact the humans. We do not involve them in council matters. This has been our policy for 300 years, and it will not change." "But they are only 12 cycles away. They could—" "They could what?" Counselor Pyrrhus of the Alendi interrupted. He was a short, furry creature with too many eyes. "Save you? Perhaps. But at what cost? Do you know what humans are, Representative Tallow? Do you know why we exclude them from this council?" Tallow said nothing. Pyrrhus continued. "Humans are monsters. They evolved on a death world, a planet where everything kills everything else. They hunted their prey by chasing it until it died from exhaustion. They made weapons that could crack their own planet in half. They killed each other by the millions for things as small as lines on a map or differences in belief." He shuddered, all his eyes blinking at once. "If we invite the humans to fight the Drath, we may save your world. But we will unleash something far worse upon the galaxy. The answer is no." The vote was taken. 200 species, 200 votes against intervention. Tallow stood alone on the platform as the council members began to leave. Her skin had gone completely gray, the color of hopelessness. "Is there no one?" she whispered, her voice still being broadcast across the galaxy. "Is there no one who will fight for those who cannot fight for themselves?" The transmission ended, but it had already been heard. 12 light cycles away, in a star system the council preferred to forget, the message reached Earth. Admiral Park Do-Yun sat in his office at the United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Seoul. He was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face lined by decades of service. Behind him, through the window, the lights of the city sparkled in the night. Captain Yoon Ji-won stood before his desk, a datapad in her hands. She was younger than him by 20 years, but her eyes held the same weight, the same understanding of what war truly meant. "The council has officially refused to help," she said. "They voted unanimously." Do-Hyun nodded slowly. He had listened to the entire transmission. Every word. "What are our nearest assets?" he asked. Ji-won checked her pad. "The battle cruiser Beko and her escort fleet. 12 ships total, currently on patrol near the rim. They could reach Cora 4 in approximately 11 cycles if they push their engines. Marines? 4,000 aboard the Beko. Full combat readiness. Lieutenant Kang Soo-jin commanding the ground forces." Do-Yun stood and walked to the window. Below him, millions of people lived their lives, working, eating, sleeping, loving. They had no idea what was happening on a distant world called Cora 4. They had no idea that an entire species was begging for someone to save them. The Council won't like this, G1 said quietly. They've made it very clear that we're not welcome in their space. If we intervene, it could be seen as an act of war. Against whom? The Drath? Doyun turned to face her. Or the Council that just condemned millions of innocent people to death because helping them was inconvenient? Jiwan had no answer. Doyun sat back down at his desk. He pulled up his communications terminal and began typing orders. His fingers moved with the certainty of a man who had made his decision and would not change it. Send a priority message to Captain Beck of the Beko. New orders. Maximum speed to Cora 4. Weapons free upon arrival against any Drath forces. Protect the Velith population at all costs. Jiwan straightened. And the Council? The Council can write us another strongly worded letter. Doyun looked up at her. They want to call us monsters? Fine, let them. But monsters can be useful when there are bigger monsters that need killing. He stood again and walked past her toward the door. Send the orders, Captain, and prepare a shuttle. I'm going to the Biko personally. Sir? Jiwan's eyes widened. You're going to command the mission yourself? Doyun stopped at the door. He didn't turn around. That woman asked if anyone would fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Someone needs to answer her. He walked out. 6 hours later, the UEDF battlecruiser Beko and her fleet of 12 warships broke orbit from their patrol route. Their engines burned blue-white against the darkness of space as they accelerated toward the outer rim, toward Cora 4, toward the Velith who had given up hope. The monsters of Earth were coming, and they were bringing war. The Galactic Council emergency session began with chaos. High Arbiter Malin stood at the center of the Great Hall, his silver face twisted with anger. Around him, 200 representatives talked over each other, their voices rising in panic and confusion. Silence, Malin shouted. The hall went quiet. We have received confirmed reports, Malin said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. A human fleet has left Earth space, 12 warships heading directly for Cora 4. They will arrive in approximately 10 cycles. The representatives erupted again. Some shouted in fear. Others demanded immediate action. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Councillor Pyrrhus of the Alendi pushed through the crowd to reach the speaking platform. His many eyes were wide with terror. I warned you, he said, pointing at the other representatives. I told you what would happen if we broadcast that transmission on open channels. The humans heard it, and now they're coming. Coming to help, someone called out. It was Councillor Veth of the Karath, a large reptilian being with scarred scales and one missing eye. Is that not what the Velith asked for? Help? Help? Pyrrhus spun toward him. You call what humans do help? Let me remind you, Counselor, exactly what we are dealing with. He waved his hand and the holographic display activated. Images began to appear, old recordings from Earth, collected by Council observation probes over the centuries. The first image showed primitive humans hunting. They didn't ambush their prey like sensible predators. Instead, they chased it, for hours, for days. They followed animals across endless plains until the creatures simply collapsed from exhaustion and fear. Then the humans walked up and killed them with rocks. Persistence predators, Pyrrhus said. They evolved to chase things until those things died. No other species in the known galaxy does this. It is madness. The images changed. Now they showed human wars, ancient battles with swords and spears, modern conflicts with tanks and aircraft, cities burning, bodies piled in mass graves, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed landscapes. They killed millions of their own kind, Pyrrhus continued. Not for food, not for territory, for ideas, for invisible lines on maps, for gods that didn't exist. They invented new ways to kill each other faster and more efficiently. Poison gas, disease weapons, bombs that could destroy entire cities in a single flash. The hall was completely silent now. And that was when they were fighting each other. Pyrrhus turned to face Malin. Imagine what they will do when they have a real enemy. Malin nodded slowly. This is why we have kept them isolated. This is why they are not part of the council. Humans are too dangerous to be allowed into the galactic community. Then what do we do? Asked Representative Naleth of the Orvian, a small, insect-like being. We cannot stop them. Our nearest fleet is cycles away. We do nothing, Malin said. We let them fight the Drath. Perhaps they will destroy each other, and we will be rid of both problems. If the humans survive, we will issue formal sanctions. Economic isolation, travel restrictions. They will learn that there are consequences for defying the Council. Far from the Council chambers, aboard the battlecruiser Baiko, life was very different. Lieutenant Kang Soo-jin stood before her Marines in the ship's main briefing room. She was 34 years old with short black hair and a long scar running down the left side of her face, a souvenir from the Titan Rebellion 5 years ago. Her eyes were calm and steady, the eyes of someone who had seen death many times and had learned to live with it. "Listen up," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "We've got 10 days until we reach Korra 4. I want every one of you ready for the worst fight of your lives." She activated the display behind her. Images of the Drath appeared, tall, insect-like creatures with dark shells and razor-sharp limbs. Their mouths were filled with teeth, and their eyes were empty black pits. These are the Drath. They're a hive species, which means they share one mind controlled by their queens. They don't feel fear. They don't retreat. They just keep coming until either you're dead or they are. Private Otawu raised his hand. He was the youngest Marine in the platoon, only 22, with a round face and nervous eyes. "Lieutenant? How many of them are there?" Sujin looked at him. "Intelligence estimates approximately 2 million on the planet." The room went silent. "And how many of us?" Taewoo asked, his voice smaller now. 4,000 Marines across the fleet, plus ship crews and support staff." Taewoo did the math in his head. That's 500 to 1. Sujin smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a wolf seeing prey. "Then it's almost fair," she said. "The Drath don't know what's coming for them." She tapped the display and it changed to show weapons and equipment. "We hit harder than anything they've ever seen. Kinetic rifles, plasma grenades, powered armor, orbital support, and if all that fails," she pulled a blade from her belt and held it up. "We have these." The Marines stared at the knife. "The Drath think they're predators," Sujin continued. "They think they're at the top of the food chain. They've never met humans before. They've never fought something that refuses to give up, refuses to lie down, refuses to die." She sheathed the knife. "We're going to teach them. We're going to show them what a real predator looks like. We're going to save those people on Korra 4, and we're going to kill every single Drath that tries to stop us." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every Marine. "Any questions?" No one spoke. "Good. Get some rest. Check your weapons. Write letters to your families if you need to." She paused. "And when we get there, remember what we're fighting for. There's a whole species down there that the galaxy left to die. They called for help, and nobody answered." Her voice hardened. "Nobody except us. So we're going to answer loud enough that the whole galaxy hears it. We're going to show them what happens when the monsters of Earth decide to care about something." She turned off the display. "Dismissed." The Marines filed out of the briefing room, their faces set with determination. They had heard the stories about the Drath. They knew the odds. They knew many of them would not survive. But they were human, and humans didn't run from fights. They ran toward them. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a fist punching through paper. Admiral Park Do-yun stood on the bridge of the Beko, staring at the view screen. What he saw made his stomach turn. Korra 4 was burning. Massive fires covered half the planet's surface. Smoke clouds so thick they could be seen from orbit drifted across entire continents. The 2 defense satellites the Velith had built were nothing but floating debris now. And surrounding the planet like a swarm of locusts were the Drath Hive ships. There were dozens of them. Each one was larger than anything in the human fleet. Organic vessels that looked like bloated insects, with dark shells and pulsing veins running across their surfaces. They were ugly things. They were terrifying things. Captain Yoon Ji-won stood beside Do-hyun, her face pale but steady. "Admiral," she said, "enemy ships are moving to intercept. They've noticed us." Do-hyun nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. He had prepared for it his entire career. But nothing could truly prepare someone for the reality of war. All ships, he said, his voice clear and strong. Weapons free. Target enemy vessels. Begin orbital bombardment of Drath ground forces. Avoid civilian centers. The bridge crew moved into action. Screens lit up with targeting data. Weapon systems came online with low humming sounds. Captain Han, Do-hyun said into the communication system, your group takes the left flank. Draw their fire. Keep them busy. On the destroyer Cheonma, Captain Han Yunji heard the order and smiled grimly. She was 41 years old, a veteran of 3 campaigns, and the mother of a daughter she hadn't seen in 6 months. Understood, Admiral, she replied. Cheonma Group, follow my lead. Let's give these bugs something to think about. Her 3 destroyers accelerated forward, their guns blazing. Plasma bolts streaked across the darkness of space, slamming into the nearest Drath ships. The organic vessels shuddered under the impacts, their shells cracking and leaking fluids into the void. The Drath responded with fury. Acid projectiles, launched from biological cannons, shot toward the human ships. One struck the destroyer Wolrang, melting through its armor and killing 30 crew members instantly. But the humans kept coming. On the Beko, Weapons Officer Lieutenant Choi Minho pressed the firing controls. Kinetic rounds away. Tungsten rods, long metal spears weighing several tons each, launched from the Beko's railguns at a fraction of the speed of light. They hit the largest Drath carrier with the force of nuclear weapons, punching through its shell and tearing it apart from the inside. The carrier exploded in a spray of organic matter and dying creatures. Direct hit, Minho shouted. Target destroyed! But there were more. Always more. Captain Hans Cheonma took a critical hit from 3 acid projectiles at once. The bridge filled with smoke and screaming alarms. Her navigation officer was dead. Her weapon systems were failing. The ship was dying around her. All hands, abandon ship, Han ordered. Then she looked at her helmsman, a young man named Seo Deho, barely 25 years old. Except you. Stay with me. Deho looked at her with wide eyes. Captain? That carrier. Han pointed at the largest remaining Drath ship, the one directing the others. We're going to kill it. Deho understood. His face went pale, but he didn't argue. He didn't run. He just nodded and gripped the controls. Full speed ahead, Han said quietly. The Cheonma accelerated toward the Drath carrier. The alien ship tried to turn, tried to evade, but the damaged destroyer was too fast, too committed. In the final seconds, Han opened a channel to the Beko. Admiral, she said, tell my daughter I went down fighting. Tell her I loved her more than anything in this universe or any other. The Cheonma struck the Drath carrier at full speed. The explosion lit up the sky above Korafor. The carrier, 3 times larger than any human ship, broke apart like a rotten fruit. Thousands of Drath died in an instant. The remaining enemy ships fell into confusion, their coordination broken with the carrier's destruction. On the Beko's bridge, Do-hyun closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. Honor her sacrifice, he said. Finish them. The human fleet pressed the attack. One by one, the Drath ships died. Far below on the burning surface of Korafor, Lieutenant Kang Soo-jin felt her drop pod hit the ground with a bone-rattling impact. She kicked open the hatch and stepped out into hell. The Velith capital of Thesson was in chaos. Buildings burned. Bodies lay in the streets. And everywhere, there were Drath. They poured through the broken walls of the city like a dark tide. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Their razor limbs cut through anything that moved. Their acid blood burned anything that came too close. Soo-jin's Marines formed up around her. 400 soldiers in powered armor, carrying the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. Contact, Sergeant Bayek Jihye reported, her voice calm despite the nightmare around them. Enemy forces 200 meters ahead. They've breached the civilian shelters. Soo-jin looked toward the shelters. She could see Velith running, beautiful, glowing creatures with 4 arms and terrified eyes. Behind them, Drath warriors closed in for the kill. No, Soo-jin said simply. Not today. She raised her rifle and began walking forward. Not running, walking, like she had all the time in the world. Like there weren't thousands of monsters between her and those civilians. Her Marines followed. "Fix bayonets," Sujin ordered. 400 blades clicked into place beneath 400 rifle barrels. The Drath saw them coming. The first wave charged, expecting easy prey. They were wrong. The humans opened fire. Kinetic rounds tore through Drath shells like paper. Plasma grenades exploded in the middle of enemy formations. Marines moved in perfect coordination, covering each other, advancing step by step. And when the Drath got close, too close for guns, the bayonets did their work. Private O Tai Wu found himself surrounded by 3 Drath warriors. His rifle clicked empty. He didn't have time to reload. So he screamed, a raw, primal sound that his ancestors would have recognized, and charged with his bayonet. The first Drath died with the blade in its throat. The second died when Taewoo pulled the blade free and slashed across its eyes. The third grabbed him with razor limbs, cutting through his armor, drawing blood. Taewoo headbutted it. The Drath stumbled back, confused. Creatures didn't fight like this. Prey was supposed to run. Prey was supposed to die quietly. Taewoo stabbed it through the skull. All around the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Humans refusing to give up. Humans taking wounds that should have killed them and still fighting. Humans protecting each other with their bodies when their weapons failed. The Velith civilians reached the secondary shelters. Marine Corporal Shin Yuna stood at the entrance, her medical kit open, treating wounds even as Drath claws scraped the walls around her. "Keep moving," she told the Velith, her voice gentle despite the chaos. "You're safe now. We've got you." A Velith child, small and glowing pale with fear, grabbed Yuna's arm with 2 of her hands. "Why?" the child asked. "Why did you come?" Yuna looked down at her. In the middle of a war zone, with death all around them, she smiled. "Because you asked," she said, "because someone should always answer." The first night on Korra 4 ended with the human perimeter holding. The Drath had been pushed back from the civilian areas. The fleet above had destroyed the enemy carriers. But the war was just beginning. The Battle of Thesson lasted 72 hours. 72 hours of constant fighting. 72 hours without sleep, without rest, without mercy. 72 hours that would change the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council watched it all. Their observation drones floated high above the battlefield, recording everything. What they saw would haunt their species for generations. In the Great Hall of the Council, representatives sat in horrified silence as the footage played. Some covered their eyes. Others could not look away, no matter how much they wanted to. High Arbiter Malin watched with his black stone eyes unblinking. His silver face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. "This," Counselor Pyrrhus whispered, "is what we were afraid of." On the screen, a human soldier, Sergeant Beck Jihi, held a breach in the defensive wall, alone, for 9 hours. Her leg was broken. She had taken 3 hits from Drath acid, each one burning through her armor and into her flesh. Her rifle had run empty long ago. All she had was a combat knife and a pile of Drath corpses that she had stacked into a barrier. The Drath kept coming, wave after wave. They climbed over the bodies of their dead to reach her. She killed them all. When reinforcements finally reached her, they found Jia still standing, covered in blood, most of it not her own, surrounded by over 200 dead Drath. Her knife had broken, so she had been using a sharp piece of Drath shell as a weapon. "Took you long enough," she said to the Marines who came to relieve her. Then she collapsed. On another part of the battlefield, Private O Tai Wu discovered something about himself. A tunnel beneath the city had collapsed during an artillery strike. 3 wounded Marines were trapped inside, and the Drath were moving in to finish them. Taewoo was the only soldier close enough to help. He went into the tunnel alone. For 6 hours, he dragged his wounded comrades through the rubble, one by one. He carried them on his back when they couldn't walk. He pulled them through narrow gaps that tore at his armor. And when the Drath found them, he fought them off with one hand while holding a wounded Marine with the other. He was screaming the entire time. Ancient words, battle cries that humans had used thousands of years ago, when they had fought with stone and fire instead of plasma and steel. The words meant nothing to the Drath, but they meant everything to Taewoo. They were the sounds of a predator, the sounds of a creature that refused to be prey. When he finally emerged from the tunnel with all 3 Marines alive, His commanding officer asked him how he had done it. Taewoo looked at him with empty eyes. "I just didn't stop," he said. "They couldn't kill me as fast as I could keep going." The council representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was the thing they feared most about humans. Not their weapons, not their ships. Their absolute refusal to give up. Most species had a breaking point, a moment when fear overwhelmed courage, when survival instinct demanded retreat. It was natural, it was sensible, it was the way the universe worked. Humans didn't seem to have one. "Look at this," Counselor Veth of the Korath said, pointing at the screen. There was something in his voice that the other representatives didn't recognize. "Look at what they're doing for strangers." The footage showed Corporal Shin Yuna in an underground shelter. Drath warriors had breached the walls. Velith civilians were screaming, running, dying. Yuna grabbed the closest child and pushed it behind her. Then she stood between the Drath and the civilians. She was a medic. She had a pistol and a medical kit. Nothing else. The Drath in front of her were 8 feet tall with claws that could cut through steel. She didn't run. A Velith mother clutched her children behind Yuna, her glow flickering with terror. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Yuna fired her pistol at the nearest Drath, taking out one of its eyes. "Because someone has to," she said. The Drath charged. Yuna shot 2 more. A third knocked her down. Its claws cut into her shoulder, her chest, her face. She kept fighting. She jammed her pistol into its mouth and pulled the trigger. Marine reinforcements arrived 30 seconds later. Yuna was still alive. Barely. She had lost so much blood that her heart had nearly stopped 3 times before they got her to a medical station. She survived. So did every civilian she had protected. By hour 60 of the battle, the Drath began to break. Not because they were losing soldiers. They had millions more waiting in their hive ships. Not because their commanders ordered retreat. The hive mind didn't think in those terms. They broke because, for the first time in their species' history, they were afraid. The humans just kept coming. No matter how many the Drath killed, more appeared. They fought in ways the Drath couldn't understand. They sacrificed themselves for creatures they had never met. They refused to die even when their bodies should have given up. The hive mind had consumed hundreds of species across the galaxy. It had never encountered anything like this. By hour 70, the Drath were fleeing. Thousands of warriors scrambled to return to their ships. The hive carriers powered up their engines, trying to escape. Admiral Do-hyun's fleet was waiting for them. "No survivors," Do-hyun ordered. His voice was flat, empty. He had seen the footage from the ground. He had seen what the Drath had done to the Velith before the humans arrived. They don't get to run away from this. The human ships hunted down every Drath vessel that tried to escape. They showed the same mercy the Drath had shown the Velith. None at all. By hour 72, it was over. Thesson still stood, battered, burning in places, but standing. In the underground shelters, Velith survivors emerged into the daylight for the first time in days. They looked around at the destruction and at the humans standing guard around them. Representative Tallow walked through the ruined streets, her glow slowly returning from gray to pale blue. She found Lieutenant Sujin sitting on a pile of rubble, cleaning her knife. The human woman was covered in dirt and blood. Her armor was cracked in a dozen places. She looked like she had crawled out of a grave. "How many?" Tallow asked softly. "How many of you died for us?" Sujin didn't look up. 847 dead, 2,100 wounded. She paused. "Could have been worse." "Could have been—" Tallow couldn't finish the sentence. She stared at the human with something between horror and wonder. "You lost nearly a quarter of your soldiers, for people you never met, for a species that had no way to repay you." Sujin finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but calm. "You didn't need to repay us," she said simply. "You needed help. That was enough." Tallow sank to her knees. Her glow shifted through colors the human couldn't read, grief and gratitude and something deeper. Something like love. "The council called you monsters," she whispered. Sujin smiled slightly. They weren't wrong. In the great hall far away, High Arbiter Malin turned off the transmission. His face was unreadable. What do we do now? Counselor Pyrrhus asked. His voice shook. Malin said nothing for a long moment. We hope, he said finally, that the monsters never decide to come for us. The Galactic Council emergency session was the largest in 300 years. Every species sent their representatives. Every world watched through broadcast relays. Billions of beings across the galaxy saw what happened on Cora 4. And now, everyone wanted to talk about it. High Arbiter Malin stood at the center of the Great Hall, trying to maintain order. It was not going well. Silence, he shouted for the 5th time. We will have order in this chamber. The representatives slowly settled down, but the tension remained thick enough to cut with a knife. We are here, Malin began, to discuss the human incursion into Council space. As you all know, the humans violated multiple treaties by entering Velith territory without authorization. They engaged in military action without Council approval. They saved my people. Every eye in the hall turned to the speaker. Representative Tallow stood in her designated seat, her forearms crossed over her chest. Her glow was bright blue, the color of conviction. The humans saved my people, she repeated. When this council, when all of you, voted to let us die. Malin's silver face tightened. Representative Tallow, you are out of order. I am speaking the truth. Tallow stepped forward, moving to the speaking platform without permission. Guards moved to stop her, but she simply looked at them, and they hesitated. The Drath killed 100,000 Velith before the humans arrived. 100,000 of my people, burning and dying and screaming for help that never came. She turned to face the full assembly. And do you know how many died after the humans arrived? Less than 5,000. Because the humans stood between my people and the monsters. Because they fought and bled and died for strangers. Counselor Pyrrhus stood. Representative Tallow, we understand your gratitude, but you must see the larger picture. The humans are dangerous. Their intervention this time was fortunate. But what happens next time? What happens when they decide they want something and they take it by force? They could have taken Cora 4, Tallow replied. They had the military power. Instead, they saved my people and asked for nothing in return. Does that sound like the behavior of conquerors? The chamber erupted in argument again. Representatives shouted at each other. Some defended the humans. Others demanded sanctions. A few quietly began messaging their governments, sensing that the political landscape of the galaxy was about to shift. In the middle of the chaos, Counselor Veth of the Korath stood and walked to the speaking platform. He was large for his species, a reptilian being covered in scarred scales, with one eye missing from some ancient battle. The Korath had been conquered by the Inari centuries ago and had never forgotten it. May I speak? Veth asked. The hall went quiet. Veth rarely spoke in council sessions. When he did, it usually mattered. For 300 years, Veth began, this council has told us that humans are monsters, predators, creatures too dangerous to be allowed into our community. We believed it because we were afraid, because the recordings from their world showed us things we didn't understand. He paused, letting his words sink in. But I watched the Battle of Thesson, every minute of it. And do you know what I saw? I saw monsters, yes. Monsters who charged into impossible odds to save innocent lives. Monsters who sacrificed themselves for people they had never met. Monsters who refused to give up even when they were wounded and dying and outnumbered. He turned to look directly at High Arbiter Malin. I saw the kind of monsters that the weak and helpless have always needed. The kind that stands between prey and predator. The kind that says no more and means it. Malin's expression didn't change, but his voice was cold. What is your point, Counselor? Veth smiled. It was not a friendly smile. My point is that the Korath have been watching this council for a long time. We have seen how it works. Strong species make the rules. Weak species follow them or suffer. When the Drath attacked the Velith, you could have helped. You chose not to. He spread his arms. The humans chose differently. And that choice means more to the Korath than 300 years of council treaties. He reached into his robes and pulled out a data crystal. This is a formal notice. The Korath people are withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will be seeking alliance with Earth. The hall exploded. Representatives screamed in shock and anger. Some rushed toward Veth. Others began calling their homeworlds. Malin slammed his staff against the floor repeatedly, trying to restore order. It was no use. Before the session ended, two more species, the Yini and the Fel, announced their intention to follow the Korath. Three more requested permission to send diplomatic missions to Earth. The Galactic Council, which had ruled the known galaxy for 8,000 years, had just cracked. Later that night, in his private chambers, High Arbiter Malin sat alone in the darkness. His silver face reflected the light of distant stars through the window. He had spent his entire life maintaining the Council's power, keeping the peace through careful diplomacy and occasional shows of force, ensuring that no single species grew too strong. And now, in the span of a few days, everything had changed. The humans hadn't just saved the Velith. They had given hope to every weak species in the galaxy. Every civilization that had ever been conquered, bullied, or ignored by the Council now saw a different possibility, an alternative. Malin thought about the footage he had watched. The human soldier with a broken leg holding a breach for 9 hours. The medic standing between Drath warriors and Velith children. The admiral who had led his fleet across the galaxy to answer a stranger's plea. Monsters, he told himself. They are monsters. But a small voice in his mind whispered something else. What if we're the monsters? What if we always were? He pushed the thought away. The Council would survive this. They had survived worse. They would find a way to contain the humans, to limit their influence, to restore the old order. But as he watched the stars, Malin couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had broken. The galaxy had seen what humans could do. It had seen what they were willing to do. And nothing would ever be quite the same again. Far away on Korra 4, Lieutenant Kang Soo-jin sat on a rooftop and watched the sunset. The sky was orange and purple and beautiful, the kind of sky that seemed impossible after 3 days of war. Private Tae-woo sat beside her, his arm in a sling. Sergeant Ji-hee was still in the medical station, but the doctors said she would recover. Corporal Yuna was awake and already complaining about being kept in bed. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. What now? Tae-woo asked. Soo-jin shrugged. Now we rebuild. Help the Velith get back on their feet. Make sure the Drath don't come back. And the Council? Soo-jin smiled slightly. The Council can keep writing angry letters. We'll keep doing what we do. Tae-woo nodded. He was quiet for a long moment. Lieutenant, why did we come here? Really? Soo-jin looked at him. In the fading light, she looked almost peaceful. Because someone asked for help, she said simply. And when someone asks for help, you answer. That's what it means to be human. The last light of day faded over Thesson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems, new battles to fight. But tonight the Velith were safe. And the monsters of Earth stood guard. 1 month after the battle, Thesson was being rebuilt. The Velith worked side by side with human engineers. Buildings rose from the rubble. Gardens were replanted. Children who had hidden in underground shelters now played in streets that had been battlegrounds. And in the central plaza, where the fighting had been fiercest, a memorial was being constructed. A great stone wall carved with the names of every human who had died on Korra 4. 847 names. Admiral Park Do-yoon stood before the unfinished memorial, his hands clasped behind his back. He had aged in the past month. His hair was grayer. His face carried new lines. He had written personal letters to the family of every fallen soldier, a tradition he had kept since his first command, decades ago. Captain Yoon Ji-won approached him from behind. Admiral, they're ready. Do-yoon nodded but didn't turn around. I was just thinking about Captain Han, he said quietly. Do you remember what she said, her last transmission? Tell my daughter I went down fighting, Ji-won replied. Tell her I loved her more than anything. I met the daughter yesterday. She came on the supply ship. She's 14 years old and she looks just like her mother. Do-yoon finally turned around. His eyes were red. She thanked me for letting her mother die a hero. Ji-won said nothing. There was nothing to say. I told her it was my honor, Do-yoon continued. And it was. But it doesn't make it easier. He straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. Let's go. The galaxy is watching. The ceremony was held in the main plaza of Thesson. Thousands of Velith had gathered, their glows mixing into a sea of colors. Human soldiers stood at attention along the perimeter. some in fresh uniforms, others still wearing the scars of battle. A platform had been constructed in the center, large enough for the officials from both species. The broadcast was being transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Council was watching, the rebel species were watching, even the Drath, in their distant hive worlds, were watching. Representative Talos stepped onto the platform first. She was wearing formal Velith robes, flowing fabric that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Her glow was bright gold, the color of celebration and hope. Behind her came Admiral Dohyun, Captain Ji-won, Lieutenant Sujin, and the surviving members of her platoon. Sergeant Ji-ye walked with a cane, her leg still healing. Corporal Yuna's face was marked with fresh scars. Private Taiwu stood straighter than he ever had before. The crowd fell silent. Talo raised all four of her arms in a traditional Velith gesture of welcome and gratitude. "People of the galaxy," she began, her musical voice carrying across the plaza and through the broadcast relays. "1 month ago, my world was dying. The Drath swarm had come to consume us. Our cities burned. Our people fled. We called for help, and the galaxy answered with silence." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "All except one." She turned to face the human delegation. The humans came. They came without being asked by any authority. They came without promise of reward. They came because a stranger called for help, and they believed that was reason enough. Her glow intensified. "They fought for us. They bled for us. They died for us. 847 of them gave their lives so that we might live. 847 families on a distant world called Earth will never see their loved ones again, because those loved ones chose to stand between the Velith and death." Tears were flowing down her face now, leaving trails of light on her cheeks. "Today, the Velith do not merely offer thanks. We offer kinship. We declare that from this day forward, humanity and the Velith are not allies. We are not partners. We are family. Our fates are joined. Our futures are shared. What threatens one threatens both. What blesses one blesses both." She reached out with all four hands toward Dohyun. "Admiral Park Dohyun, will you accept this bond on behalf of your people?" Dohyun stepped forward. He was not a man for speeches. He had spent his life giving orders, not making declarations. But billions were watching, and some things needed to be said. "Representative Talo," he said, his voice steady, "on behalf of the United Earth Defense Force and the people of Earth, I accept your offer of kinship." The crowd cheered, a sound like wind through crystals, beautiful and strange. When the noise died down, Dohyun continued, "But I want to say something else, not just to the Velith, to everyone who's listening." He turned to face the broadcast drones directly. "The Galactic Council called us monsters. They were right. Humanity is exactly what they fear. We are hunters. We are warriors. We are creatures of violence and blood and fire." He paused. "But that's not all we are. We are also protectors. We are the ones who stand between the weak and those who would destroy them. We are the voice that answers when someone cries for help." His voice hardened. "The Council left the Velith to die because helping them was inconvenient. They calculated the costs and decided that an entire species wasn't worth the trouble. That's not who we are. That's not who we will ever be." He looked around at the soldiers behind him, at Sujin, at Taiwu, at Jihye and Yuna, and all the others who had fought and survived. "Earth doesn't fight for conquest. We don't fight for resources or territory or power. We fight because it's right. Because when someone cries for help, you answer. The Council forgot that. We never will." He turned back to the drones. "So here's our promise. To any species out there, prey or predator, strong or weak, if you call for help, humanity will answer. We don't care what the Council says. We don't care about borders or treaties or politics. You call, we come." His eyes narrowed. "And to the Drath and anyone else thinking about preying on the innocent, remember what happened here. Remember what happens when you threaten the people we care about. Remember what the monsters of Earth are capable of when we decide that something matters." He stepped back from the drones. The plaza was silent for a long moment. Then Talos spoke again. "The declaration of Thesson is witnessed. Let the galaxy know that on this day, a new alliance was born. not from politics or profit, but from blood and sacrifice and hope. She raised her arms again. May it stand for 10,000 years. The Velith cheered, the human soldiers saluted, and across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and understood that everything had changed. The Galactic Council's monopoly on power was broken. A new force had entered the game, one that didn't play by the old rules, one that answered when someone called for help. That night, Lieutenant Sujin found Private Taewoo sitting alone on the memorial steps, staring at the names carved into the stone. "You should be at the celebration," she said. Taewoo shook his head. "I keep thinking about them, the ones who didn't make it. They were my friends, my family, and now their names are on a wall on a planet nobody had heard of a year ago." Sujin sat down beside him. "That's the job," she said quietly. "We go where we're needed. We fight for people who can't fight for themselves. And sometimes we don't come back." She looked at the names. "But we came back. And because we did, millions of Velith are alive tonight who wouldn't be otherwise. Their children will grow up and have children of their own. Generations from now, this planet will still be here, still free, still alive, because of what we did." She put a hand on his shoulder. "That's worth dying for. That's worth everything." Taewoo was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was stronger. "Lieutenant, next time someone calls for help, I want to be there. I want to answer." Sujin smiled. "Good, because there will be a next time. There always is." Above them, the stars burned cold and bright, and somewhere out there, in a galaxy full of dangers and wonders, other species heard the declaration of Thesson. The monsters of Earth had made their promise. Now they would keep it. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Thesson. The galaxy had changed more in those 5 years than in the previous 500. The Galactic Council still existed, but its power was a shadow of what it had been. One by one, species had broken away to join the new alliance that humanity had built. They called it the United Terran Alliance. 14 species now stood together under its banner, not because they had been conquered, but because they had chosen. Because they believed in what the humans had shown them on Korra 4, that someone would answer when you called for help. Admiral Park Do-yoon sat in his quarters aboard the new flagship, the Hwarang. It was twice the size of the old Becho, built with the combined technology of a dozen worlds. Through the window, he could see the fleet stretching into the distance, 100 ships from a dozen species, all flying under the same command. His command. They had named him Supreme Commander of the Alliance Fleet after the declaration of Thesson. He had tried to refuse. He was just a soldier, he said. He wasn't a politician or a diplomat or a symbol. They had given him the job anyway. Now his hair was completely white, and his face carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. He had ordered men and women to their deaths. He had watched friends burn in the void of space. He had done terrible things in the name of protecting the innocent, and he would do it all again. A knock came at his door. "Come in," he said. Captain Yoon Jawan entered. She was an admiral herself now, commanding her own fleet, but she still reported to Do-hyun when it mattered. They had been through too much together for anything else. "Sir," she said, "we've received another SOS." Do-hyun felt a familiar tension settle into his shoulders. "Tell me." "The Oran system, a species called the Malith. They're being raided by Inari slavers." Do-hyun closed his eyes for a moment. The Inari, High Arbiter Malin's people, the founders of the Council, the ones who had voted to let the Velith die all those years ago. They had grown desperate as their power crumbled. Slavery, once practiced in secret, had become their main source of income. They raided weak species on the edges of what remained of Council space, taking prisoners to sell on black markets. The Alliance had warned them, multiple times. The warnings had been ignored. "How many ships can we spare?" Do-hyun asked. 15 combat vessels, plus the Marine Division." The Marine Division, Lieutenant General Kang Soo-jin's unit. She had been promoted 3 times in 5 years, each time for doing something that should have killed her. She still led from the front. She still fixed bayonets when the situation called for it. Some things never changed. "Send them," Do-hyun said. Ji-won nodded. "There's something else. The Council has issued a formal protest. They're calling our operations in the Oran system an act of war." Do-hyun laughed. It was not a kind sound. Let them. The Inari declared war when they started taking slaves. We're just responding. Jiwon hesitated. Sir, some people are worried. The old council species still have significant military power. If they unite against us, they won't. Do-yun stood and walked to the window. The council is finished, Jiwon. They just don't know it yet. Their whole system was based on fear. Fear of the Drath, fear of chaos, fear of each other. But we showed the galaxy that there's another way. He watched the fleet drifting past. We showed them what happens when someone actually fights for what's right. And now species that spent centuries being afraid are standing up. They're refusing to be prey anymore. The council can't put that genie back in the bottle. Jiwon nodded slowly. I'll send the orders. After she left, Do-yun sat back down at his desk. There was a picture there, an old photograph printed on actual paper. It showed a group of soldiers standing in front of the baiko, smiling at the camera. Half of them were dead now. Captain Han Yunji, dozens of Marines who had died at the San, officers who had fallen in the campaign since then. Do-yun looked at their faces and made the same promise he made every day. We won't forget. We won't stop. Not until the galaxy is safe for everyone. 6 hours later, the Alliance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the Oran system. Lieutenant General Kang Soo-jin stood on the bridge of the transport ship, watching the tactical display. She was 40 years old now, with gray streaks in her black hair and a map of scars across her body. But her eyes were still the same, calm, steady, ready for whatever came next. What do we have? She asked. Her adjutant, Major Oh Tai-woo, checked his screens. He wasn't a private anymore. He had grown into a soldier who could stand beside anyone. 12 Inari raiders. They've already landed on the Malith homeworld. They've taken approximately 10,000 prisoners. Soo-jin's expression didn't change, but her voice went cold. Slavers. Yes, General. Then we know what to do. She activated the fleet-wide communication. All ships, this is General Kang. Begin orbital bombardment of enemy vessels. Marine units, prepare for immediate ground assault. Rules of engagement are simple. Protect the Malith, eliminate the slavers. No prisoners. Tae-woo looked at her. General, the council can write us another letter. Soo-jin smiled grimly. I haven't read any of the others. I'm not going to start now. The battle was short. The Inari raiders were not expecting a military response. They were used to preying on the weak, on species that had no protector. When the Alliance fleet appeared, they tried to run. They didn't get far. Alliance ships hunted them down with the same efficiency they had used against the Drath 5 years ago. One by one, the raiders died in fire and vacuum. The survivors on the ground fought harder, taking Malith prisoners as hostages. It didn't help them. Soo-jin led the ground assault personally. She was too old for this, her doctors kept telling her. Too valuable. She should command from a safe distance. She ignored them. She ignored them because somewhere on this planet, innocent people were in chains. And as long as she could carry a weapon, she would not let that stand. Private, no, Colonel. Shin Yuna led the medical teams that followed the Marines. She had refused desk jobs 6 times now. She had medals she never wore. She had scars she would carry forever. But she also had a record of not losing a single patient since Thesson. Not one. Some people called it luck. She called it refusing to accept any other outcome. By the end of the day, all 12 Inari raiders were destroyed. Their crews were dead or captured. 10,000 Malith prisoners were free, weeping with relief as human medics treated their wounds. The Malith leader, a small fur-covered being with large sad eyes, found Soo-jin after the battle. He looked up at the human woman who had fallen from the sky to save his people. Why? He asked. It was the same question the Velith had asked 5 years ago. The same question every species asked when they first met humanity. Soo-jin looked down at him. She thought about all the battles she had fought, all the friends she had lost, all the times she had wondered if any of it mattered. Because you needed help, she said, and when someone needs help, you answer. That's who we are. The Malith bowed his head. Tears ran down his furry face. We will not forget this, he said. Don't, Soo-jin replied. And when the next species needs help, be there for them. Pay it forward. That night, Supreme Commander Park Do-yoon stood on the bridge of the Hwarang and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Galactic Council were plotting against him. The Drath Swarm was rebuilding in their distant hive worlds. New threats were emerging from the dark spaces between galaxies. The work was never done. It never would be. But tonight, 10,000 people were free who had been in chains this morning. Tonight, a species that had given up hope had found it again. Tonight, the monsters of Earth had done what they always did. They had answered the call. Jiwon stepped up beside him. "You should rest, sir," she said. "Tomorrow will bring new problems." Do-yoon nodded slowly. "It always does. But that's all right. That's why we're here." He looked at the stars one last time. "That's what monsters do. We protect our own." And out there, in the vast darkness of space, 1 billion species knew that if they called for help, someone would answer. The monsters of Earth would come, and they would bring war to anyone who threatened the innocent. That was their promise. That was their purpose. That was who they were. Forever.